Hello YouTube, today I want to teach you guys how to become an elite sprinter. It's really simple, believe it or not. It's just that it requires a lot of time and you're probably focusing on the wrong things. So I'm just going to quickly go over the things that I think are the most important to becoming an elite sprinter. Elite, let me start by defining what I mean by elite. Elite isn't a specific time or a goal that is just given by other people, but it's your own. So, for example, let's say you're sprinting 13 seconds. Elite for you could be 11 seconds. Maybe it could be 10. Maybe it's sub 10. It doesn't matter. Whatever you deem or consider elite is what's actually elite. And before we actually even start getting into the things necessary towards becoming an elite sprinter, it's worth getting this definition of what you consider elite down. Because if you don't know what you consider to be elite, how are you going to walk towards it? Because if your goal is to be an elite in anything, you need to know what you're trying to get to. It's good and dandy mapping out a path, but if you don't know where this path is supposed to lead you, how can you be elite? For example, I can Google how to become an elite sprinter into Google, but the stuff I might be given could be based off of obviously it's based off of other people's definition of what elite is, but it could be stuff that would be able to make a 13-second sprinter, a 12-second sprinter, or a 10-second sprinter, a sub 10-second sprinter. It has to be specific to you, and you need to know what it takes to get to the necessary steps. So let's say you sprinted 100 meters in 13 seconds, and sprinting elite for you would be a 10-second time. Let's use my 100-meter target as the definition of elite in this case. So 10.5 for 100. Let's just use 100 meters, 10.5. That would mean you need to know what it takes to go from 13 seconds to 12, 12 seconds to 11, and 11 seconds to, at the very least, 10.5 before you can even start trying to map out your own plans. So now that we've got the definition down, in this case for me, it would be 10.5. And for this person who we're using who's sprinting 13 seconds, it's also 10.5. Now we can actually look at what needs to be done to try and get to this elite time of 10.5. So before we can again even look at what can be done, we need to set ourselves a time frame. It can be realistic and it can be unrealistic, but it should be as realistic as possible. If it's unrealistic, it should be borderline unrealistic. So if you tried really hard, it would be possible to achieve this goal. So let's say it'd be possible for a 13-second sprinter to go 10.5 and let's say that they always train consistently, they listen to their body, and they have a decent amount of natural talent. They record themselves, they take in everything they're given, and they look for any faults. They always look for faults every single time they're working, and they work as hard as they can. They manage to go to 10.5 in 3 years. And let's say they set that as their time frame. Now they need to map out what they need to do in each and every individual year. And the way you do that would be to look at how fast you can go in a year. So let's say you could go 12 seconds in 1 year, and the next year you could go 11 seconds in the next, and then 10.5. That would mean for the first year, you need to look at what's required to go from 13 seconds to 12 seconds. And you'd do research on all those necessary things, and you keep going from 12 to 11 and 11 to 10.5. Now that's great. Now we actually look at the stuff that would be required to do to actually get those times. There are two things you need to focus on, which would be working the gym and sprinting. Sprinting being the most important and gym being secondary. As an athlete, you need to understand and always remember that your sport is the most important thing, it's the most important thing, and doing more of that is what will make you better, not any supplementary training. Because going to the gym is an accessory to sprinting. It's not necessary. You can still be a really, really fast sprinter even if you never go to the gym. Why? Because plyometrics exist. If they didn't exist, you'd have to go to the gym a lot, but you need to remember that plyos exist. And these are what actually are going to help you become the athlete and, more importantly, the sprinter you want to be. But now that we've got that out of the way, now let's actually look at them all. So when you're in the gym, you need to make sure you focus on strength and speed. you want to train for about 3 times a week, no more than that, maybe 4 at most, but you don't want to do too much, and you want to make sure that you keep the hours in the gym minimal unless you're in your off season. The reason being, like I said before, the gym is fun, very fun, but it's only an accessory to the real work you're actually doing, which is on the track. The work you're doing on the track, or the work you're doing on grass, should be the most important thing to you, and that should be what you focus on. Hence, you should only go to the gym after you've already sprinted or you've done your sprint training. Now, when you're in a gym, like I said, focus on strength and power. What this means is, if you're going to be doing bodybuilding at all, it should be kept to the bare minimum, and it should only really occur during your off season. Anytime after that, and if you're still doing bodybuilding work, it should slowly start to be decreased. As an athlete, you should be aware that it's pretty difficult to break up your workouts into different days, because you're sprinting and you're going to the gym, and both of those consume your central nervous system, which is what's actually used to help you do all these movements. And sprinting and the work you do in the gym are both highly taxing, which is why you can't do a lot of work in the gym, because you also need to make sure that the work you do in the gym is after the sprinting, because your CNS needs to be as fresh as possible for when you actually sprint, because that's what's important. You need to get your body, your central nervous system, used to moving in these movements and getting more efficient with it. And then the gym work should be highly effective, high intensity, focusing on speed and power, but it should be as minimal as possible, but it should be a full body workout. The reason being is because if you do too much work, your CNS will get taxed, and over time your CNS could potentially fry, which would mean no training on track or grass, depending on the season you're in, and definitely no training in a gym. And if you still manage to pull off the training, you still force yourself to go, you wouldn't be able to go as hard, which would mean you have to deload. Deloading is fun. I mean, it's not fun, but it's fun after the deload's happened. But whilst you're in that deload, it's painful. It's not nice at all, because you're not doing much. It just feels like you're just going through the movements. And for sprinting, for the deload, you might not even be able to sprint, so you might just be doing drills, unfortunately. So the stuff you'd be doing in the gym, that would be more stuff like Olympic weightlifting, think stuff you probably, if you bench, it wouldn't be you benching often either, because you could lock out your shoulders. Luckily, you'd be in the gym, you'd be doing Olympic weightlifting, and you'd also be sprinting, which means that you're mobilizing your shoulders a lot, so it would be kind of hard for your shoulders to get locked in, so it's harder for you to catch the positions when you're doing the Olympic weightlifting and to actually sprint with a full range of motion, considering how consistently you be doing these. But it's still worth noting that you should probably limit the benching, not do it too often. If you're going to be doing it, do it like 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off, and again, only 3 times a week. Obviously, I'm not a professional. This is just a general guideline of what you can do. So for more work in the gym, what you should really be understanding is you should listen to your body. Olympic weightlifting is very important. You should do it because it's one of the best ways in the gym you can use to produce strength and power. So obviously, you're going to have to be doing these movements, especially the clean. The clean is really important. You want to get as high as possible in that, but I'm going to leave this information for another video. But obviously, when you're in the gym, you want to focus on what's good for you, what your body handles well, and you want to remove the things that it doesn't respond to. A couple of things you can do in the gym as an athlete would be the clean and jerk and the snatch. All 3 of those are Olympic weightlifting movements. Other than that, you can also front squat and back squat, a trap bar deadlift, straight bar deadlift, though you might want to consider keeping the deadlifts to a bare minimum, purely other than maybe the trap bar, purely because there isn't much turnover or crossover, over into the sport as there is for the other movements. For example, if you squat, you're going to get large quads, which is going to help for your acceleration. Deadlifts do give you large hamstrings. However, there's not much of a crossover into sprinting compared to squatting and doing Olympic weightlifting movements. Other than that, you can do some other stuff as well, like you can do weighted dips, you can do weighted pull-ups. There's a bunch of other stuff you can do. But in general, I'll be making a separate video on what other type of stuff you can do in the gym. But that's a general basis of what you could be doing in the gym. Next, the most important thing is sprinting. Now, there's three main things that you want to focus on when you're sprinting, which would be working on acceleration, plyometrics, and building your aerobic base. Your aerobic base is very important as an athlete because it means you can take less rest. Well, not so much less rest, but you can have more of a recovery with less rest. So say your coach gets you to sprint like 200 meters with a full recovery, so about 13 minutes. You might feel like you've completely recovered whilst other people are still panting at the end of the 30 minutes purely because you built an aerobic base. Though I believe, this is only my personal opinion, though other people do support this, I believe when you're building your aerobic base, you should either try and keep it as close to sprinting as possible or not build it with any form of running at all. I mean, you can do both, but I mean, if you're going to be building your aerobic base with long tempo runs, I wouldn't really recommend it unless you're actually going to be sprinting, but at a slower speed, so you can keep the form of sprinting, purely because the form you incorporate when you're sprinting and the form you incorporate when you're jogging are very different. If you jog too much, it can slightly start to degrade your sprinting form, which could unfortunately result in slower times if done too often, and probably mean you're going to have to spend more time trying to fix your form, your technique, which means you're going to sprint slower than you probably originally could have, unfortunately. So a couple alternatives to just jogging, would be slow sprinting, so you still have the form of sprinting. So slow sprinting, burpees, they are painful, but they're very good at what they do. They're very good. Other than that, you've got the skipping rope, and then just sports that are very high, that use the cardiovascular system very highly. So you can cycle, you can box, you can swim. There's a bunch of other different things you can do. You can explore with it depending on how much money and resources you have or lack thereof. For me personally, I do slow sprinting, full speed sprinting, though I do that carefully. I do burpees and I box. I've done swimming in the past, I've cycled in the park recently as well. So you can do all different types of things to work on your cardiovascular system to build your aerobic base. It doesn't really matter so much. One thing I do want to say is I will be making a video on the importance of burpees because I do think they're very good, especially if you're a longer sprinter. So if you do the 200 and the 400, specifically mainly the 400, the 400 is very, very good with burpees. Burpees are very, very good in my opinion for the crossover. Like I said, I'll be making a separate video on that later on. But other than the aerobic base, you want to do plyometrics. Plyometric training is a bit of an iffy one, because you see a lot of videos on plyometrics saying do box jumps or these different types of things. But what's important is that you understand that you can't just jump. That's kind of funny. You can't just jump straight into those. You need to, like with your base building for your aerobic system, build up into those. The way you can do this would be by doing really just slow tap jogs on your toes, where you just try and jump up as high as possible, but you're doing it really slowly. So it looks like you're jogging, but you're not. You're just applying as much force as you can the second you touch the floor. You're not really going to be going very far, very much. You're not really be going far or a lot, but you're getting your body used to having to apply as much force as possible in a short amount of time. But it's low intensity, so you can do this for a long amount of time. This will work to build up your plyo base so that your body is more used to it, and the chance of you getting injured would decrease, and you'll be able to do these exercises more. Another thing worth noting is you should try and aim to do no more than about 120 touches of plyometrics. A touch being every single time your foot touches the ground, other than most likely the last rep, because that doesn't really count. You're just landing. You're not actually doing a plyo movement. Because if you do more than that by a decent amount, what will end up happening is your CNS will very quickly fry. And this could it might not just fry your CNS, but it could hurt your tendons as well. It could result in you not being able to walk, do other basic movements like that. I recently experienced that. Like 2 months ago, I did a lot. I didn't count my touches back then, so I did a lot of plyometrics, and I had to walk for hours as well. And because of that, I ended up getting pains in my tendons and even my knees, which resulted in me having to take a decent amount of time off of sprinting and just general life. Now, the next thing, final thing, would be your acceleration. Your acceleration is your drive phase, and that, in my opinion, is the most important thing in the entirety of sprinting. The reason being is not only is how much efficient your drive phase is important to how likely you are to win the race, but the acceleration will also determine how fast you'll be able to go through the entirety of the race, because the speed you move at, if you have a poor acceleration, is probably not your maximum potential. I'm gonna go find a rubber band. So I couldn't really find a rubber band, but this will have to do. So let's say this stretched wide is the maximum speed your body is able to achieve right now. With a poor acceleration, what will end up happening is this potential will only remain potential. I ran out of storage on my phone, so I'll start again. But like I was saying, so this is your maximum, and if you have a poor acceleration, what will end up happening is you'll never reach this wide length. You'll only ever reach maybe here, or here, or here, or here. What you'll notice is the closer these rings get, the easier it is for me to let go and nothing to happen. What this means is, since you have such a poor acceleration, all of the speed you generate is actually coming from when you're already upright. And if you know anything about acceleration, then you know not only is it important because it helps you actually generate force, and that force is just maintained throughout the rest of the race, which means you generating acceleration whilst you're upright is bad because you're having more contact time. So if you even win the race, it's a bit shocking. But it also means that you're wasting less energy, not just because you're only having to do maintenance later on in the race, but also because less of your body is being hit by air resistance, because the lower down you are, not only is there less air that's hitting you, but your angling means that air can only hit you in certain areas, which would be excluding the places that can't avoid being hit, like your head, your arms, and your legs. But instead of the entirety of your chest and stomach, it's only hitting your shoulders, and then as you rise, the top of your chest, and then until it's hitting everything. Having a more efficient acceleration means that now you're actually able to not only reach this stretch, but you're able to do it with less energy than you was reaching this amount. And it also means that with the stretch you can reach now, you're faster, and you don't want to be faster, you want to be an elite sprinter. And I think these are all important things that would be necessary to becoming one. Now, the final thing that is necessary to become an elite sprinter, in my opinion, would be the mindset. This is probably the most important thing, because trying to become an elite in anything is not mundane, but it's very repetitive and it's very boring. You're doing the same things day in, day out, maybe different things every week, or different things each and every day in a week, but every week is basically the same thing. You wake up at the same time probably to go train at the same time, to do the same things in training each day, to train for the same amount of time, to go to gym the same amount of time and do all of that. And then life will start to bog you down. And if you focus too hard on trying to reach this goal and you neglect the rest of your life, especially if you're a student like myself, this could result in your grade slipping. And you don't want that to happen, because if that starts to slip, then now you're in this place where you have to decide which one do you value the most. Do I want to get good grades, or do I want to become a really good athlete? You shouldn't be in this limbo state. You should be able to find a balance where both of them occur, because sprinting, which I didn't say before, but just like gym, should only be done about 3 times a week. If you're sprinting more often than that in a week, then you shouldn't be doing much work. So let's say, for example, let's say you go train on Monday, and on Monday you do the 40 plyo touches, you do 3 accelerations, you finish your, I mean, this is like, I wouldn't recommend doing this at all, but then you go out and decide to do some aerobic base building. You do like a couple 300 repeats with full recovery, maybe not even full recovery, just 300-meter repeats and then walk back and then go again. I mean, walk back as in the whole 300 meters, not the 100 meters. So there is a much longer rest. But if you was to do all of that, and you was like, okay, I'm not making enough progress, let me work not just on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but Monday through Friday, you wouldn't be able to do all of that work at once. You'd have to break each of those up. So on Monday, you might have the plyo touches and maybe one acceleration. And then on Tuesday, you only focus on accelerations. You don't even do much. You maybe do almost 3. And then on Wednesday, you do the aerobic base, and then you just repeat, so on and so forth. Maybe even go and do some work on Saturday. But the point is, the work you'd already be doing in a week doesn't really increase. And if it does, it's not by much. If it does, it's by like maybe 10%. But what really happens is the work you was originally doing on those 3 days gets broken up. So if you didn't have enough time to do the full workout, well, now you definitely do. So now you don't have to worry about, for example, not having enough time to revise, to do your work, to go to work, whatever your whatever ties you down in life, whatever you need to pay attention to, you can't just ignore. So there's no excuses there. But obviously with this, there's cons to everything. So your CNS doesn't really get to recover much. And if you was to do this, I've done it before, and I would only recommend doing that if you was trying to do it because you're trying to focus on something. So when I did this, it was to focus on my acceleration because it was poor. So I was trying to make it very much more better than it was already, which was it wasn't good at all. But I was trying to make it good. So I didn't do anything else. All I did was work on my acceleration. I'd do like 5-10 steps at most, and I just get down, all fours, put my hands down, and just go for it repeatedly. Luckily, it doesn't really take much work on my CNS, and because I didn't have a season that time. Because I didn't have a season, I didn't have to worry about accidentally peaking. I just needed to worry about recording myself and making sure that my form is good. So if you were to train that many times in a week, go do it if you're trying to focus on something. Otherwise, I'd recommend you still keep it to 3 times a week. If you need to cut down on the work, like whilst time was away for nobody, as long as you're consistent, you don't have to worry about how long it takes for you to reach your goal of being an elite sprinter. Even if you are 13 seconds and you set your goal as 12 seconds, and 12 seconds flat in this scenario, we're trying to go for flat. I should have said that. So 12 seconds flat, keep running out of space on my phone. But like I was saying, even if you are 30 seconds trying to go 12 flat, getting 12.2, 12.4, 12.5, there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. You're making progress. Just stay consistent. As long as you stay consistent, you're going to continue to go forwards. And as long as you continue to go forwards, who cares? Just keep your goal of 11 flat the next year and see how close you get. Just stay consistent, keep going, and eventually you're going to reach there. It doesn't matter if it takes you 5 years to the projected 3 years you set for yourself. As long as you get there, isn't that the goal anyway? You're an elite sprinter. Those time frames are pretty quick. Like, I mean, there are people who take like half a decade or more to even reach those goals from where you'd start from. And the fact that you even got there is wonderful. So don't complain, just stay consistent. Remember this, to stay consistent. Even if it seems mundane, boring, and all the other problems that might throw themselves at you, just keep going. Because as long as you keep going, you have to understand, your body will not forsake you. It will not forsake you. You will get those times. And that's my thoughts on how to become an elite sprinter. As long as you follow these, they're really simple, really basic, but as long as you follow those, you will end up becoming an elite sprinter.